I'm at the Bharat Mandapam International Media Center where the G20 event is happening, the G20 Annual Summit of 2023. And most of the world leaders that we know of have reached New Delhi, but there have been a couple of notable exceptions. One is obviously the Russian President, Mr. Vladimir Putin, and the other is Mr. Xi Jinping, President of China. And some notable events have already happened. For instance, the African Union has been officially inducted into the G20 grouping of nations. It will have the same status as the European Union, and this has happened at the initiative and behest of India. So India is very strongly positioning itself as the voice of the global south, of the developing nations, of the underprivileged nations. So that has happened, but the question is, will the absence of Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi Jinping throw any kind of pall on the proceedings? Will it take away the sheen to some extent from the annual summit of the G20 grouping? And Mr. Xi Jinping has made it a point to attend every single G20 summit that's happened in the past as long as he has been president. So that's kind of interesting. We do understand why Mr. Vladimir Putin has chosen not to come to India for the G20 summit. He also did not attend the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, which happened quite recently. And Mr. Putin did telephone Mr. Modi a couple of weeks ago roughly and inform him that he would not be attending the G20 summit. Mr. Xi Jinping did no such thing, and until I think they first released the information to the Western media and not to India, not to the Indian government, that Mr. Xi Jinping won't be coming. So that's the different approach the Chinese have taken to announcing that they are not attending, that Mr. Xi Jinping is not attending this summit. They informed this to the Western media and not the Indian government first. And it's only a couple of days ago that the Indian government was officially told in writing. So the question is, why has Mr. Putin chosen not to attend, and why has Mr. Xi chosen not to attend? Well, from the perspective of Mr. Putin, it's very simple. It's very clear. There's a very clear reason why he's not attending. It's because there is this war that's going on in Ukraine, and Russia is not quite on speaking terms with the West. There is this raging conflict that's going on, and it doesn't make any sense for him to come face to face with these leaders who may actually, not treat him very well, who may kind of cold shoulder him. You don't want to attend a big event in which a significant portion of the leaders will refuse to talk to you. And also there's the question of the international warrant that's been put out in his name, which is, so these are the reasons, very valid reasons why Mr. Putin is not traveling abroad right now. He did attend last year's SCO summit in Samarkand, I believe it was, Uzbekistan, and he does attend some regional grouping meetings here and there around Russia, but he doesn't travel far from Russia. So it's very clear why Mr. Putin is not visiting. He has a very clear, valid reason. When it comes to Mr. Xi Jinping, it's more interesting. They have given no real explanation as to why Mr. Xi Jinping isn't attending this summit meeting. And there isn't any clear, valid reason the way Mr. Putin has for not attending. So one of the reasons could be that Mr. Xi Jinping doesn't want to risk getting a less than enthusiastic response or welcome from India. Because as we know, India is a nation that has no enemies. It has created no enemies except for China and except for Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is a proxy of other nations, and China is an issue in itself. China doesn't have friendly relations with any of its neighbors. And the fact that India and China don't see eye to eye and have this hostile relationship is entirely the fault of China. We did not start it in India. So that's one reason. And we have this ongoing border standoff, 50,000 troops on either side in the Himalayan region, facing down each other, staring each other down, Indian and Chinese troops. And the Chinese have been provoking India for a very long time, and this culminated in the Galwan clash a couple of years ago, where a number of soldiers from both sides lost their lives. And this was all done by China. It was provoked by China. So the relations aren't good at all between India and China. And recently China has put out this map, this cartographic aggression, in which it has claimed not just Indian territory, but also Russian territory. So after doing all this, it doesn't make much sense for him to come to India. He will possibly not be given a very enthusiastic, very warm welcome. Secondly, Mr. Xi Jinping has issues and bad relations with almost half the nations of the G20. And one of the biggest ones, apart from India, is the US, obviously. So there is this hostile, tense relationship with the US and other nations as well. Nobody quite likes China. So that's another reason why. And thirdly, India has taken the G20 to a very different level this year. So every year there's this summit, the G20 summit. Last year it was in Bali in Indonesia, and the G20 events were held in a couple of cities. Well, when it comes to India, the G20 events have been held in more than 61 locations across the length and the breadth of the country. And millions of Indians have been directly impacted in a positive way by the G20 proceedings, and millions more are aware of what the G20 is and why it matters. And these events across India have showcased to the world the incredible diversity of Indian culture and the incredible vitality of the Indian people and the growing economy and the growing stature of India and the growing capabilities that India has. So this has been a very impressive 1-year event, an ongoing event in India. And China obviously isn't very happy about that. They obviously see India as an emerging rival. The only nation that can, counterbalance China or surpass China eventually in the long run in Asia is India. So the only Asian nations the Chinese fear is India, and they see India as a big rival. And they may feel that sending Mr. Xi Jinping to this event would, give it additional higher stature. And that's why maybe it's out of cynicism and out of envy and out of pettiness that they have chosen that Mr. Xi Jinping has chosen not to attend this event. Now, it doesn't matter whether he attends or not, because the event is already a big success. The way India has conducted its G20 presidency has been, it's taken the whole thing to a whole different level compared to what other countries have done. It's been a resounding success already. India has taken the initiative on a number of things, on a number of matters. The G20 obviously is an economic grouping of nations. It's not a political or strategic grouping. It's an economic grouping of nations. And India has focused on furthering the interests of the developing nations, the global south, and on inclusive governance, inclusive economics. India has given out its DPI, the digital public infrastructure that India has created, to anybody who wants it, any nation who wants it, for free. It's all open source. So India has taken the initiative in a number of things, and so it's already a big success. We're not quite sure if the final statement will see consensus among all nations. There's a final declaration that goes out at the end of each summit, in which all the nations have to come to a consensus as regards to the language that's used in that. And obviously this year there's the issue of Ukraine, which is kind of hangs like a shadow over the summit. And the Western nations will want to include some language that references Ukraine and condemns Russia in the final declaration. Russia and China obviously will not allow that to happen. So it may well be that there is no final declaration, there is no consensus, and India gives out some kind of statement on behalf of everybody else. So that's the kind of situation we have right now. But regardless of that, it's already been a great success. India has already achieved a big milestone by paving the way for the inclusion of the African Union in the G20. So overall, it's already a big success. And today is just the first day of the summit. Monsieur Macron of France just reached Delhi. So some leaders are still in the process of arriving, but the event is underway. Prime Minister Modi has officially welcomed the African Union into the grouping. So we can look forward to a couple of days, to 2 days of deliberations and talks. There have been bilateral discussions as well between Mr. Modi and various world leaders, including Mr. Biden of the US. So there's a lot more to come, and I will cover this all as this happens, more or less in real time. So yeah, that's it for me for right now, but I'll see you very soon.